Hello everyone, I am Robert. My parents tried to give my inheritance to their favorite daughter, but my grandparents had a surprising twist in store. I am a 28-year-old male who comes from a family with a convoluted and long history of favoritism. My younger sister, Nancy, who is 25, has always been preferred by my parents, especially my dad, starting from our childhood. This partiality only got worse as we grew up. Nancy was the golden child from my earliest memories. For example, our parents threw her an elaborate birthday party, complete with professional face painters, a bouncy castle, and a petting zoo, when I was 5 and she was 2. That same year, I only had a store-bought cake and a little family supper for my birthday. This helped to define the tone for years to come. The differences became clearer as we aged. Nancy always received the newest toys, the greatest clothes, and the most attention. I recall saving months of my allowance to buy a new bike when I was 10 years old. Nancy saw it and wanted one too. Instead of teaching her about waiting or saving, my parents went right out and bought her an even nicer bike than mine. Another area where the bias was evident was in school. My parents attended all of Nancy's school functions while they usually missed mine. I took the front stage in a school play in the 4th grade. I practiced for weeks, driven by great enthusiasm. My parents arrived an hour late on the night of the play, missing my major scene. They were consoling Nancy after she complained of a stomach ache, though she was fine later on. They simply lost track of time playing with her. Regarding academics, nothing I ever did seemed sufficient. I joined the math club, often received straight A's in middle school, and even took first place in a regional science fair. My parents hardly noticed these successes. Meanwhile, they gave Nancy a celebratory dinner and purchased her a new phone as encouragement when she scored a B+ on one test in her weakest subject. High school was particularly difficult. With an eye toward their approval, I put myself into whatever activity I could, all while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. I was the editor of the school newspaper and the debate team captain. Nancy, on the other hand, coasted through school, barely maintaining a C average and spending much of her time hanging out with friends. I was chosen as one of 2 junior-year applicants from our university to participate in a prestigious summer program at Harvard. It was such an honor, and I felt great. When I shared the news over supper, my dad grumbled and quickly shifted the topic to Nancy's forthcoming dance performance. At least my mother remarked, "That's nice," but she moved on fast. My parents couldn't even bring me to the airport when Nancy's concert fell on the same day I was leaving for Harvard. They wanted to see Nancy perform, so I asked the parents of a friend for a ride. Another agonizing experience was the college application process. I worked for months on improving my essays, engaged in extracurricular activities, and prepared rigorously. Several elite colleges accepted me, and I was given a sizable scholarship to my ideal college. When I told my parents about this over supper, their reaction was barely passable. "That's good, but don't let it get to your head. College isn't everything," my dad advised. My mother added, "Just remember about us when you're off becoming a big shot." On the other hand, my parents were quite understanding when Nancy barely passed high school and chose not to attend college. They admired her for knowing herself and for defying social expectations, something they never did for me. They even bought her a car as a graduation gift. Emotionally, this persistent favoritism affected me greatly over my teens and early 20s. I battled anxiety and despair and began therapy in college. I came to realize that my parents' actions were not my fault. Years of effort were needed to build my self-esteem and learn to validate myself rather than depend on my parents' approval. My immediate family did not help me, yet I still managed to lead a decent life. By the time I graduated from college with honors, I had a decent job in finance and even purchased my own house by 27 years old. Though my parents weren't proud, I was glad for what I had accomplished. Here is where the current drama begins. On my dad's side, my grandfather passed away not too long ago. He left a sizable estate and was a successful businessman who started from nothing. In his will, he split his possessions equally among his grandchildren, including me, Nancy, and our cousins, as well as his children, my dad and his siblings. My portion of the inheritance was significant, roughly $500,000. It would have allowed me to invest in my future, pay off my education loans, and perhaps even launch my own company someday. This unanticipated windfall and the opportunities it could present made me happy. However, when the will was read, my parents clearly became agitated. Later, they pulled me aside and told me that they felt it was unjust for me to receive an equal portion. Nancy, who lives in our parents' basement and works part-time at a coffee shop, said she needed the money more since she was struggling. Though stunned, I tried to remain calm. I clarified that Grandpa made this decision and that they had no say in how he divided his estate. They insisted I should act morally and give Nancy my share. When I declined, they became enraged and began guilt-tripping me, calling me ungrateful and selfish. My dad started recalling every instance where they had helped me, even though I worked part-time to help with finances. He emphasized paying for my medically necessary braces, buying me school supplies, the bare minimum, and allowing me to reside at home during college. He conveniently forgot about the car they bought Nancy, the many shopping sprees, and the fact that they still support her at 25. The matter escalated quickly. Acting as the will's executor, my dad decided to handle things himself. He declared that he would interpret Grandpa's intentions and give Nancy my entire portion. He claimed that Grandpa would have wanted this if he had known our unique situation. I was devastated. What my parents attempted was not only illegal but also a painful reminder of how little they thought of me. I pointed out that Grandpa had always treated all his grandchildren equally and that he was aware of our circumstances. I tried to reason with them, but my mother accused me of speaking ill of the deceased by implying that Grandpa would have preferred anything other than what my dad was advocating. I shared certain memories of Grandpa supporting my academic and career goals, but my parents dismissed them as misunderstandings. They insisted that Grandpa wanted to ensure Nancy was taken care of and had privately expressed concerns about her future. When I asked why he hadn't drafted the will that way, they had no response. Nancy, for her part, seemed awkward about the situation but didn't criticize our parents. She merely shrugged and said, "Mom and Dad know best." When I tried to talk to her alone, it was clear she wasn't going to be much help. Feeling misled and hurt, I turned to Grandpa's widow, my paternal grandmother, for guidance. Hearing what was happening, she was enraged. She informed me that my parents had no authority to alter the will and that this was exactly what Grandpa had not wanted. Grandma sent some documents that clarified the situation. Several years ago, my parents had asked Grandpa to leave everything to Nancy in his will. Grandpa had steadfastly refused, saying he believed all his grandchildren should be treated equally. He even included a clause in his will stating that anyone challenging the fair distribution would lose their share. Armed with this knowledge, I confronted my parents. Grandma's revelation of their previous attempt to influence the will stunned them. They tried to justify their actions by saying they were only looking out for Nancy's future, but I could see the guilt on their faces. Grandma took immediate action. She contacted the will's other executors and the family attorney. She also reached out to my dad's siblings, who shared her strong disapproval of what he was trying to do. Together, they stopped my dad's scheme and ensured that the will would be carried out as intended. Although my parents are unhappy with me, they were forced to back off. They argued that I should have handled this in-house instead of involving others and accused me of turning the family against them. My mother cried, saying that I had split the family and betrayed them. I told her I had never expected anything from them anyway. In response, my dad threatened to cut me out of their will entirely if I accepted the inheritance. He went so far as to suggest that I would not be welcome in their home should I inherit. In a particularly low blow, my mother remarked that accepting the money proved I never truly loved them and that I was just waiting to profit from their deaths. This situation has divided the extended family. A few of my cousins have been supportive, as they understand the long-standing favoritism and appreciate me standing up for myself. Others, however, believe I should have backed down to preserve peace, arguing that family harmony should come before financial considerations. Although my dad's siblings are firmly on my side, this conflict has strained their relationship with my parents as well. Nancy, unfortunately, is caught in the middle of it all. She confided in me privately that, while she feels bad and didn't ask for any of this, she isn't ready to challenge our parents. She's been conditioned her whole life to depend on them and seek their approval. I don't blame her entirely, but a part of me wishes she would support me just once. This ordeal has brought back a lot of past pain and resentment. I find myself remembering all the times I was overlooked or dismissed in favor of Nancy, the birthday celebrations I missed, the school events my parents skipped, the achievements that went unnoticed. This one incident seems to be bringing a lifetime of unfairness to the surface. Although this conflict has created a great divide in the family, I am standing my ground and intend to take my inheritance as Grandpa intended. My parents barely speak to me now, and family gatherings have become tense and awkward. Last week, I missed our monthly family meal for the first time ever because I couldn't bear the cold shoulders and accusing glares. Despite the turmoil, a small part of me feels empowered. For the first time in my life, I am confronting the unfair treatment from my parents. I'm asserting my value and refusing to be dismissed. This is both terrifying and liberating at once. Even though I believe I'm in the right, the family drama is exhausting. I haven't felt this overwhelmed since college, and I've started experiencing anxiety attacks again. To help manage this stress, I'm considering going back to therapy. Am I wrong for standing up to my parents and accepting my inheritance? Should I have just handed everything over to Nancy to keep the peace? While I'm tired of being the family scapegoat, I also fear losing my family entirely. Any advice or perspective would be deeply appreciated. Update. Since my initial post 6 months ago, a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone for their support and guidance. It truly kept me strong during these trying circumstances. Let me start with the legal aspect of things. Many of you advised me to consult my own attorney, and I did. He confirmed that I had every right to inherit and that what my dad attempted was, in fact, illegal. He helped me record everything and was ready to act legally, should the need arise. Fortunately, things did not transpire that way. Along with my dad's siblings, my grandma and her attorney worked out the matters without involving the court. I got my entire fortune, and the will was carried out exactly as intended. Due to his attempts at will manipulation, my dad was removed as an executor. This was a somewhat demanding process spanning several weeks. My parents threatened litigation. There were tense meetings and furious phone calls, but ultimately, the law was unambiguous, and they had to back off. The family fallout, however, has been noteworthy. At first, my parents doubled down on their viewpoint, accusing me of being avaricious and neglectful of my sister. They also sought to mobilize other family members against me, spreading allegations that I had somehow coerced Grandpa into giving me money. Luckily, most of the family saw through their trickery. About a month after the will's acceptance, there was one particularly unpleasant occurrence at a family gathering. My parents showed up unannounced. My aunt was hosting and hadn't invited them. They started a scene, shouting about how I had taken from Nancy and corrupted Grandma against her. My dad claimed that I had ruined all these wonderful memories, and my mother flung an old photo album squarely at my feet. It was awkward and terrible. It took several relatives to calm things down and persuade my parents to leave. Bless her heart, my grandmother turned out to be my most powerful supporter through all of this. She shared stories of how my grandfather had always been proud of my achievements and how he especially wanted to ensure that all his grandchildren had equal opportunities. She even revealed that Grandpa had maintained a scrapbook of my accomplishments, including newspaper clippings of academic honors, copies of my college acceptance letters, and even the program from a university play my parents had been late to attend. This insight was both sad and wonderful. Grandma also volunteered to straighten the record with the wider family. She organized a family gathering, excluding my parents, where she laid out the entire history of my parents' partiality, including events I had long forgotten or never even heard about. Having someone finally recognize the unfairness I had endured for years was vindicating, but it also reopened old wounds. Regarding my sister Nancy, she finally found her voice in all this. She came to me personally and apologized for not standing up for me earlier. After some soul-searching and several long talks with our grandmother, she admitted that while she also felt our parents' favoritism was improper, she had been too scared to confront it. We discussed our childhood and how it had shaped both of us in great depth and with emotional intensity. Nancy confessed that being the favored child wasn't as wonderful as it seemed. She never learned how to stand on her own 2 feet and felt immense pressure to live up to our parents' expectations. She told stories of times she yearned to accomplish things independently, but our parents would swoop in and handle everything for her, depriving her of the opportunity to develop and learn from her mistakes. For our relationship, this talk marked a sea change. We began to mend the sibling bond that our parents' partiality had broken. Just the two of us have been routinely meeting for coffee to discuss and support each other through this family crisis. Nancy's declaration that she was going to pay for college with her inheritance astonished everyone. She said that seeing me stand up for myself inspired her to start managing her own life. Once she decided what she wanted to study, she enrolled in a nearby community college, intending to transfer to a 4-year university. Our parents were taken aback. I think they knew deep down that their babying had not done Nancy any favors. Their response to all of this has been varied and changing. Initially, they attacked both of us angrily, trying to guilt Nancy into quitting college to help the family, claiming that I had turned her against them. When that failed, they changed tactics. After several protracted talks with my grandmother and witnessing Nancy's remarkable transformation, my mother began to acknowledge how damaging their actions had been. She has made some tentative moves toward reconciliation, even beginning therapy to address her issues. She reached out to apologize, admitting that she had been unfair and requesting a chance to make things right. It's a slow process, and while I'm cautiously hopeful, I'm also maintaining firm boundaries. Sadly, my dad has been less willing to accept any responsibility. Still furious, he sees himself as the victim in all this. He has been cold toward Nancy since she chose to go to college and hardly speaks to me. He has tried a few times to manipulate us, threatening to sell our childhood home if we don't come to our senses, or forgiving us if we realize we were wrong. Although we are both standing strong, it hurts to see him distance himself from both of his children like this. The dynamics among the extended family have changed dramatically. I now live closer to my dad's siblings. The support I have received from my grandmother, aunts, and uncles has been quite helpful. Having heard from them about handling my dad's challenging conduct over the years, I feel less isolated in this fight. This situation has also deepened my bonds with some of my cousins, who stood by me. As a result, we started a monthly cousin meal, allowing us all to catch up, free from the drama of the older generations. For myself, I have been making sensible use of my inheritance. Having paid off my college loans, I now feel an incredible sense of financial freedom. By working with a financial advisor, I have assembled a varied investment portfolio. I've also set aside some funds with the potential to launch my own company a few years down the line. One idea I'm exploring is opening a community center that offers reasonably priced mental health treatments and financial literacy seminars. However, the most significant use of the money has been buying therapy sessions for myself and volunteering to do the same for Nancy. Both of us are learning to set reasonable boundaries with our parents and are working on healing from our childhood experiences. Though it's a long road, I feel like I'm growing in knowledge and ability to overcome emotional neglect and long-term favoritism. This whole process has brought some surprising positive changes into my life. I now have a much clearer understanding of how to establish limits and defend myself. While I know I did the right thing, it hasn't been easy, and there are still difficult days. Despite this, I feel proud of myself for resisting guilt and pressure. One of the most unexpected results has been a shift in my career path. Dealing with family conflict and undergoing therapy has helped me see my own passion for supporting people who are dealing with similar family dysfunction. I'm currently considering returning to school to specialize in helping adult children of emotionally immature parents and eventually work as a family therapist. I've also been volunteering at a nearby youth facility, assisting young people from challenging family backgrounds. Being able to offer the kind of support and encouragement I wish I had received as a child has been immensely satisfying. I'm even considering using some of my inheritance to create a scholarship fund for children from similar circumstances. My contact with Nancy has been improving steadily. Once a month, we have a siblings' day where we do something enjoyable together, just the two of us. Our hiking and picnic last month were the most relaxed and connected I've felt with her since we were small children. Without our parents' influence, We are gently rebuilding our relationship on our own terms. Regarding my parents, things remain complicated. My mom has been making efforts to rebuild our relationship by regularly attending therapy sessions. She has even started to recognize some of the damage her favoritism caused. We've had a few one-on-one lunches where we've engaged in honest, albeit challenging, conversations about our past and future. While our relationship isn't perfect, there is visible improvement. My dad, however, remains resistant to change. He still maintains that he did nothing wrong and insists that Nancy and I should be more appreciative. He refuses to be in the same room as me, which has caused him to miss several family functions. Though it hurts, I am working on letting go of the need to make him see things differently or control his reactions. For both Nancy and me, our grandmother now serves as a steady source of support. She has been sharing more stories about our grandfather and his pride in us for standing up for ourselves. Always an advocate for justice and understanding, she has become a fantastic mediator in family conflicts. This entire journey has taught me a great deal about the true meaning of family. I've come to realize that sometimes the family you choose can be more supportive than the one you were born into. Alongside building a close-knit circle of friends who have been incredibly helpful, I've grown closer to my aunts, uncles, and cousins who stood by me. Setting boundaries and practicing self-care have become more essential to me than ever before. I'm getting better at saying no to situations that compromise my mental health, and I no longer feel guilty about prioritizing my personal well-being. For a long time, I was so focused on gaining my parents' approval that I neglected to explore new interests and hobbies. To anyone in a similar situation, I would advise, don't let anyone make you feel guilty about claiming what is rightfully yours, even if it causes controversy. It's okay to stand up for yourself, even though family dynamics can be complex. You deserve fair treatment. Remember, it's never too late to start building the life you deserve. Seek therapy if necessary. Surround yourself with supportive people, and don't be afraid to set boundaries. Your worth is defined by who you are, not by how your family treats you. I want to thank each of you again for your suggestions and encouragement. They meant more than you might realize during a very trying time. Although the road has not been easy, I am looking forward to the future and feeling a confidence I haven't experienced in years. I am excited about where this new chapter in my life will lead, and am determined to break the cycle of favoritism, creating healthier relationships in my own future family. Regarding my parents, things remain tricky. My mom has been making efforts to rebuild our relationship. She has been routinely attending therapy and has even begun to recognize some of the damage her favoritism caused. We've had a few one-on-one lunches where we've engaged in honest, though challenging, conversations about our past and the way forward. Although it's not perfect, I can see signs of improvement. My dad, on the other hand, still resists change. He insists that he has done nothing wrong and believes that Nancy and I should be more appreciative. He refuses to be in the same room with me, which has caused him to miss several family functions. Though it hurts, I am working hard to let go of the need to compel him to see things differently or to control his reactions. For both Nancy and me, Grandma now serves as a source of stability. She has been sharing more stories about our grandfather and his pride in us for standing up for ourselves. She has always been a strong advocate for justice and understanding, making her a fantastic mediator in family conflicts. This entire process has imparted many lessons about the true meaning of family. I've come to realize that sometimes the family you choose can be more supportive than the one you were born into. Alongside developing a close-knit circle of friends who have been incredibly helpful, I've grown closer to my aunts, uncles, and cousins who stood by me. Setting limits and practicing self-care have also become more crucial to me. I'm getting better at saying no to situations that compromise my mental health, and I no longer feel guilty about prioritizing my personal well-being. For so long, I was preoccupied with trying to gain my parents' approval, which made me neglect exploring new interests and hobbies. To those in similar circumstances, I would say, don't let anyone make you feel guilty about claiming what is rightfully yours, even if it causes controversy. It's okay to stand up for yourself, even though family dynamics can be complex. You deserve fair treatment. Remember, it's never too late to start building the life you deserve. Seek therapy if necessary. Surround yourself with supportive people, And don't hesitate to set boundaries. Your worth is defined by who you are, not by how your family treats you. I want to thank each of you once more for your suggestions and encouragement. They meant more than you could have known during such a challenging period. Although the road has not been easy, I am optimistic about the future and feel a sense of self-assurance that I haven't experienced in years. The possibilities that this new chapter of my life presents are exciting, and I am determined to break the pattern of favoritism and build healthier relationships in my own future family. Thank you for reading. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more real-life stories happening around you.
Grandma, please, I can't breathe here. Save me from this nightmare. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My grandson's voice, usually so full of life, now trembled with fear. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. Jonah? What's wrong, sweetheart? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. I can't talk now. She might hear me. Please, Grandma, just come get me. The line went dead. I stared at the silent phone, my mind reeling. What nightmare was Jonah living in? And who was this she he was so afraid of? My name is Marlo, and I thought I knew my family. I was wrong. I grabbed my car keys, my hands shaking. The drive to Eli and Lila's house felt like an eternity. My son and his wife had always seemed like the perfect couple, doting parents to my precious grandson. But Jonah's desperate plea echoed in my ears, shattering that illusion. As I pulled into their driveway, I saw Lila's silhouette in the window. She was pacing, gesticulating wildly. I couldn't hear her words, but her body language screamed anger. I marched up to the front door and rang the bell. Silence fell inside the house. After a moment, Lila opened the door, her face a mask of forced pleasantness. Marlo, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. What a surprise. We weren't expecting you. I pushed past her into the house. Where's Jonah? Lila's smile faltered for a second. He's in his room, doing homework. You know how busy he is with school. I'd like to see him, I said, already heading for the stairs. Lila's hand shot out, gripping my arm. Now's not a good time, Marlo. Why don't you come back this weekend? I yanked my arm free. I'm here now, Lila. And I'm seeing my grandson. As I climbed the stairs, I heard Lila hiss, Eli, your mother's here. I found Jonah's door closed. I knocked softly. Jonah? It's Grandma. The door cracked open, and Jonah's pale face appeared. His eyes were red-rimmed, his cheeks tear-stained. Without a word, he threw himself into my arms. Oh, sweetheart, I murmured, holding him tight. What's going on? Before Jonah could answer, Eli appeared in the hallway. Mom, what are you doing here? I looked at my son, over Jonah's head. I got a call. Jonah needed me. Eli's brow furrowed. A call? Jonah, you know you're not supposed to use your phone during study time. Jonah stiffened in my arms. I felt a surge of protectiveness. Eli, something's wrong here. Jonah called me in tears, begging for help. Don't be ridiculous, Mom, Eli said, but I saw uncertainty flicker in his eyes. Everything's fine, right, Jonah? Jonah pulled away from me, his eyes darting between his father and me. I just... Lila appeared behind Eli, her face a storm cloud. Jonah, go finish your homework. Marlo, I think it's time for you to leave. I stood my ground. I'm not going anywhere until I know what's going on in this house. Lila's eyes narrowed. Oh, Marlo, here to save the day again? Maybe if you spent less time meddling, you'd see things clearly. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. I looked at Jonah, saw the fear in his eyes, and made a decision. Whatever was happening in this house, I was going to get to the bottom of it. My grandson needed me, and I wouldn't let him down. This isn't over, I said, my voice low and determined. Not by a long shot. As I left the house, Lila's words followed me. It never is with you, is it, Marlo? I got into my car, my mind racing. Something was very wrong in my son's home, and I had a sinking feeling that Lila was at the center of it all. One thing was certain, I would do whatever it took to protect Jonah. even if it meant tearing this family apart to save it. I couldn't shake the unease that clung to me after leaving Eli and Lila's house. Jonah's frightened face haunted me, his silent plea for help echoing in my mind. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. The next morning, I drove back to their neighborhood, parking a block away. I'd wait, watch, and hopefully catch a moment alone with Jonah. As luck would have it, I spotted him trudging towards the bus stop, shoulders slumped. I pulled up beside him. "Jonah, honey, get in." His head snapped up, relief flooding his features. He glanced around nervously before climbing in. "Grandma, what are you doing here?" "I couldn't stop worrying about you. Talk to me, sweetheart. What's going on at home?" Jonah's eyes welled up. "Mom, she's different when you're not around. She says awful things. Makes me feel worthless." My heart clenched. "What kind of things, Jonah?" He shook his head, fear creeping back into his expression. "I can't. She'll know I told you." I reached out, squeezing his hand. "I won't let anything happen to you, I promise." Just then, a car horn blared behind us. Lila's sleek sedan pulled up, her face a mask of fury behind the wheel. "Jonah, get out of that car right now." I turned to my grandson. "You don't have to go with her if you don't want to." Conflict warred on his face. Finally, he whispered, "I'm sorry, Grandma," and slipped out of the car. Lila stormed over, grabbing Jonah's arm. "What do you think you're doing, Marlo? Trying to kidnap my son?" "I was giving my grandson a ride to school," I said, keeping my voice level. "Is that a crime now?" Her eyes narrowed. "Stay away from my family. You're poisoning Jonah's mind with your interference." "The only poison here is coming from you, Lila," I shot back. She laughed, a brittle sound. "Oh, Marlo, here to save the day again? Maybe if you spent less time meddling, you'd see things clearly." I watched helplessly as she dragged Jonah to her car. As they drove away, I caught a glimpse of his face in the rear window, eyes pleading for help. That evening, I called Eli. "We need to talk about what's happening with Jonah." "Mom, please," he sighed. "Everything's fine. Lila told me about your little stunt this morning. You can't just show up and try to take Jonah." "I wasn't taking him anywhere. I'm worried about him, Eli. Can't you see something's wrong?" "The only thing wrong is you overstepping, Mom. Lila's a good mother. She takes care of us." I bit back a frustrated scream. "Open your eyes, Eli. Your son is suffering." "I think you should take a step back," he said coldly. "Give us some space." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, anger and fear warring inside me. How could Eli be so blind? Later that night, I jolted awake to my phone buzzing. A text from an unknown number. "Grandma, please help. Mom's on a rampage. Dad won't do anything. I'm scared." My blood ran cold. I threw on clothes and raced to my car. As I sped towards Eli's house, my mind raced. What was I walking into? How bad had things gotten? I pulled up to see lights blazing in every window. Muffled shouting leaked through the walls. Taking a deep breath, I marched up to the front door and pounded on it. Eli yanked it open, his face a storm cloud. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I pushed past him. "Where's Jonah?" Lila appeared, her eyes wild. "Get out of my house." "Not without seeing my grandson," I said firmly. A crash from upstairs made us all freeze. Then Jonah's voice raw with tears. "Just leave me alone." I locked eyes with Eli. "Still think everything's fine?" For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in my son's eyes. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't rest until Jonah was safe and this family's dark secrets were dragged into the light. The morning after the explosive confrontation at Eli's house, I found myself sitting across from Iris at our favorite cafe. My hands shook as I clutched my coffee mug, recounting the events of the past few days. "I don't know what to do, Iris," I confessed. "Jonah's clearly suffering, but Eli's in denial and Lila. She's like a fortress I can't breach." Iris leaned forward, her eyes filled with concern. "Marlo, you need concrete evidence. Without it, it's just your word against Lila's." "But how?" "Jonah's too scared to speak up and Eli won't listen." Iris paused, then said softly, "Sometimes, Marlo, the truth hides in the silence. You need to listen to what's not being said." Her words struck a chord. "What are you suggesting?" "I hate to say it, but have you considered recording what's happening in that house?" I recoiled. "You mean spy on them? That's illegal, isn't it?" Iris shrugged. "It's a gray area. But if it means protecting Jonah," the idea gnawed at me. It felt wrong, invasive. But then I remembered Jonah's terrified face, his desperate pleas for help. What choice did I have? "I'll think about it," I said finally. That afternoon, I found myself parked outside Eli's house again. My heart raced as I watched Lila's car pull out of the driveway. This was my chance. I knocked on the door, plastering on a smile when Eli answered. "Hi, honey. I thought I'd stop by and apologize for the other night. Can we talk?" Eli hesitated, then nodded. "Come in, Mom." As we sat in the living room, making awkward small talk, I discreetly pulled out the tiny audio recorder I'd bought that morning. My hands trembled as I activated it and slipped it behind a photo frame. "Is Jonah home?" I asked casually. "He's upstairs doing homework," Eli replied. "Mom, about last night?" I cut him off. "It's okay, Eli. I know I overstepped. I just worry, that's all." Our conversation meandered, neither of us addressing the elephant in the room. After about an hour, I made my excuses to leave. "Do you mind if I use the bathroom before I go?" I asked. Once upstairs, I slipped into Jonah's room. My grandson was hunched over his desk, not even looking up as I entered. "Jonah?" I whispered. He startled, turning to me with wide eyes. "Grandma, what are you doing here?" I crossed the room, pulling him into a tight hug. "I'm trying to help you, sweetheart. I need you to trust me, okay?" Jonah nodded against my shoulder. I quickly placed another recorder under his desk, praying he wouldn't find it. "Stay strong," I murmured. "I love you." As I left the house, guilt and determination warred within me. What I'd done felt wrong, but the alternative, leaving Jonah in that toxic environment, was unthinkable. The next few days were agony. I jumped every time my phone rang, half expecting Lila to have discovered the recorders. But nothing happened. Finally, a week later, I returned to retrieve them. My hands shook as I downloaded the audio files onto my computer. For hours, I listened. Most of it was mundane homework discussions, TV in the background. But then I heard it. Lila's voice, dripping with venom. "You ungrateful little brat," she hissed. "After everything I do for you, this is how you repay me? You're worthless, just like your father." Jonah's muffled sobs tore at my heart. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'll do better, I promise." "You think Grandma cares?" Lila sneered. "She doesn't. You're just a burden, Jonah. To everyone." I slammed the laptop shut, ball rising in my throat. The truth was worse than I'd imagined. Lila wasn't just cold or strict. She was emotionally abusive, systematically destroying Jonah's self-esteem. As the shock wore off, determination set in. I had my evidence now. It was time to confront this situation head-on, no matter the cost. Jonah's future depended on it. I picked up my phone, my finger hovering over Eli's number. This call would change everything, but I was ready. For Jonah, I'd move heaven and earth. And Lila? She was about to learn that hell hath no fury like a grandmother scorned. My hands trembled as I replayed the recordings for the third time. Each word from Lila's mouth was like a dagger to my heart, confirming my worst fears about Jonah's home life. "You're nothing but a disappointment," Lila's voice hissed through the speakers. "No wonder your father can't stand to be around you." Jonah's muffled sobs tore at my soul. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'll do better, I promise." "You think Grandma cares?" Lila sneered. "She doesn't. You're just a burden, Jonah. To everyone." I slammed the laptop shut, ball rising in my throat. The evidence was irrefutable. Lila wasn't just strict or cold. She was systematically destroying Jonah's self-esteem, isolating him from everyone who loved him. My phone buzzed. A text from Eli. "Mom, can we talk? Something's not right with Jonah." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. "Come over," I replied. An hour later, Eli sat across from me, his face etched with worry. I don't know what to do, Mom. Jonah's grades are slipping. He barely talks anymore. Lila says he's just being dramatic, but you know that's not true. I finished for him. Eli nodded, his eyes filling with tears. What's happening to my family? I reached for his hand. Eli, there's something you need to hear. With a heavy heart, I played him select portions of the recordings. Eli's face crumpled as he listened to Lila's venomous words and Jonah's broken responses. No, he whispered. This can't be real. Lila wouldn't. She loves Jonah. This is how she treats him when you're not around, I said gently. Eli, your son is suffering. Eli stood abruptly, pacing the room. How did you get these recordings? Did you spy on us? I met his gaze steadily. I did what I had to do to protect my grandson. This is illegal. Eli exploded. You had no right. I had every right. I shot back. Jonah called me begging for help. What was I supposed to do? Stand by and watch him be destroyed. Eli collapsed back into his chair, head in his hands. I can't believe this is happening. Believe it, I said firmly. Now the question is, what are you going to do about it? He looked up at me, conflict warring in his eyes. I need to talk to Lila. There has to be an explanation. Eli, I pleaded. You heard the tapes. There's no explaining that away. She's my wife, Mom. The mother of my child. I can't just. Can't just what? I interrupted. Protect your son? Be a father? Eli flinched as if I'd slapped him. That's not fair. No. What's not fair is what's happening to Jonah, I retorted. He needs you to step up, Eli. To be his advocate, his protector. And what if you're wrong? Eli challenged. What if this is all some misunderstanding? I leaned forward, my voice low and intense. Then prove me wrong.
But don't you dare ignore this, Eli.
Your son's life, his future, depends on what you do next. Eli stood, his face a mask of turmoil. I need time to think, to process all this. As he headed for the door, I called out, Eli, remember, Jonah is the victim here. Not Lila, not you, and certainly not me. Whatever you decide, put him first. After Eli left, I sank onto the couch, emotionally drained. I'd done what I set out to do, present the evidence to Eli. But would it be enough? Would he find the strength to confront Lila and protect Jonah? My phone chimed with a text from Jonah. Grandma, something's wrong. Dad came home, looking upset. Mom's yelling. I'm scared. My heart raced. Things were coming to a head, and fast. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I would do whatever it took to keep Jonah safe, even if it meant tearing this family apart to save it. Jonah's text message sent me into a panic. I grabbed my keys and raced to Eli's house, my heart pounding with every mile. As I pulled up, I could hear shouting even from the driveway. I burst through the front door without knocking. The scene that greeted me was chaos. Lila was screaming at Eli, her face contorted with rage. Eli stood there, pale and shaken, while Jonah cowered in the corner, his hands over his ears. You believe that interfering old witch over your own wife. Lila shrieked. Lila, please, Eli pleaded. We need to talk about this calmly. Talk. There's nothing to talk about. Your mother has poisoned you against me. I stepped forward. That's enough, Lila. This ends now. She whirled on me, eyes blazing.
You.
This is all your fault. You've ruined everything. The only thing I've done is expose the truth, I said firmly. Eli, are you going to stand there and let this continue? Eli looked torn, his gaze darting between Lila and Jonah. I don't know what to believe anymore. Believe your son, I urged. Look at him, Eli. Really look. As if seeing Jonah for the first time, Eli's eyes widened. He took in his son's trembling form, the fear etched on his young face. Jonah, Eli said softly, taking a step towards him. Lila intercepted, grabbing Eli's arm. Don't you dare. He's just being dramatic, like always. Something in Eli snapped. He wrenched his arm free.
No, Lila.
This isn't drama. This is our son, terrified in his own home. Eli, open your eyes, I pleaded. Jonah needs you to be his father, not just Lila's husband. For a moment, the room was silent save for Jonah's muffled sobs. Then Eli straightened, a resolve I hadn't seen in years settling over his features. Jonah, go pack a bag, he said quietly. You're going to stay with Grandma for a while. Lila's face drained of color.
What?
You can't do that. I can and I am, Eli replied. We need some time apart, Lila. All of us. As Jonah scurried upstairs, Lila turned on me, her voice low and menacing. You'll regret this, Marlo. I'll make sure of it. I met her gaze steadily. The only thing I regret is not seeing through you sooner. Eli stepped between us. That's enough. Lila, we'll talk tomorrow. For now, I think it's best if you stay with your sister. Lila's mouth opened and closed, shock replacing anger. You're choosing them over me? Your own wife. I'm choosing our son, Eli said firmly. And it's about time I did. As Lila stormed out, slamming the door behind her, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. But I knew this was just the beginning. Jonah came downstairs, clutching a hastily packed duffel bag. His eyes were red-rimmed, but there was a glimmer of hope there too. Eli knelt in front of him. I'm so sorry, son. I should have seen what was happening. I should have protected you. Jonah threw his arms around his father, breaking down in sobs. Eli held him tight, his own tears falling freely. I watched them, my heart aching. We had a long road ahead, but for the first time in months, I felt hope. As we left the house, Eli turned to me. Mom, I don't know how to thank you. If you hadn't pushed. I squeezed his hand. You're doing the right thing now, Eli. That's what matters. Driving home with Jonah beside me and Eli following in his car, I knew we were at a turning point. The confrontation had been painful, but necessary. Now came the hard part, healing the wounds Lila had inflicted and rebuilding this fractured family. But looking at Jonah's peaceful face as he dozed in the passenger seat, I knew it was worth it. Whatever came next, we would face it together. And Lila? She was about to learn that messing with my family was the biggest mistake she'd ever made. The days following Jonah's move to my house were a whirlwind of emotions. Eli spent every free moment with us, his eyes constantly darting to Jonah as if afraid he might disappear. The change in Jonah was subtle but unmistakable. His shoulders gradually relaxed, his smile appeared more frequently, and he began to speak up without flinching. One evening, as Jonah was engrossed in a video game, Eli pulled me aside. Mom, I need to talk to Lila, he said, his voice low and strained. I can't keep avoiding this. I nodded, squeezing his arm. You're doing the right thing, Eli. Do you want me to come with you? He shook his head. No, I need to do this alone. But can you keep Jonah here tonight? Just in case things get heated. My heart clenched at the implication, but I agreed. As Eli left, I couldn't shake the feeling that this confrontation would change everything. Hours passed with no word from Eli. Jonah had gone to bed, but I couldn't sleep, pacing the living room. Just after midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from Eli. It's over. Coming back now. Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by concern. What had happened? Eli arrived looking utterly drained, his eyes red-rimmed. Without a word, he collapsed onto the couch beside me. Eli? I prompted gently. What happened? He took a shuddering breath. It was, God, Mom, it was awful. I confronted Lila about everything, the emotional abuse, the manipulation. She denied it at first, then she just exploded. I listened in horror as Eli recounted the argument. Lila had raged, accusing him of betrayal, blaming me for poisoning their family. This is your fault, Eli. Eli mimicked Lila's words. Your mother has poisoned our family. She's turned you and Jonah against me. What did you say? I asked, dreading the answer. Eli's eyes met mine, a mix of pain and determination in them. I told her it was over, that I couldn't be with someone who hurt our son like that. I asked for a divorce. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. I reached out, pulling Eli into a tight embrace as he finally broke down, his body shaking with sobs. "I failed him, Mom," Eli choked out. "I should have seen it sooner. Protected him better." "You're protecting him now," I assured him. "That's what matters." As Eli's tears subsided, a new resolve seemed to settle over him. "Lila threatened to fight for custody," he said. "She said she'd ruin us all if I tried to take Jonah away from her." A chill ran down my spine. "She won't win," I said firmly. "We have evidence of her abuse. We'll fight this, Eli. Together." Eli nodded, exhaustion etched on his face. "I know. It's just, how did we get here, Mom? How did I not see what was happening in my own home?" I had no easy answers for him. Instead, I squeezed his hand. "What matters now is moving forward.
Healing.
Both you and Jonah." As if summoned by our conversation, we heard a small voice from the stairs.
Dad.
Jonah stood there, looking small and vulnerable in his oversized pajamas. Eli opened his arms, and Jonah flew into them, clinging tightly. "It's okay, buddy," Eli murmured. "Everything's going to be okay now." Watching them, I felt a fierce protectiveness surge through me. Lila's threats echoed in my mind, but I pushed them aside. We had a long road ahead, custody battles, therapy, rebuilding trust, but in that moment, seeing Eli and Jonah together, I knew we'd get through it. As the night wore on, with Jonah nestled between Eli and me on the couch, I allowed myself a moment of cautious hope. The worst was over, but the real work of healing was just beginning. Whatever Lila threw at us next, we'd face it as a family, stronger and more united than ever before. The weeks following Eli's confrontation with Lila were a delicate balancing act. Jonah remained with me, while Eli split his time between work, visiting us, and dealing with the impending divorce proceedings. The change in Jonah was remarkable, like watching a flower slowly unfurl after a long winter. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I heard laughter floating in from the backyard. Peering out the window, I saw Jonah and Eli engaged in an impromptu game of catch, their faces alight with genuine joy. It was a sight I hadn't witnessed in far too long. Later, after Eli had gone home and Jonah was getting ready for bed, I knocked gently on his door. "Can I come in, sweetheart?" Jonah nodded, patting the spot next to him on the bed. As I sat down, he leaned against me, a gesture that made my heart swell. "How are you feeling, Jonah?" I asked softly. "About everything that's happened?" He was quiet for a moment, fidgeting with the edge of his blanket. I feel different, Grandma. Like I can breathe again." His words echoed my thoughts from earlier. "That's good, honey. You know you're safe here, right?" Jonah nodded, then hesitated. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course, anything." He took a deep breath. "Mom, she used to tell me things. About you, about Dad. She said you didn't really love me, that I was just a burden to everyone." My heart clenched painfully, but I kept my voice steady.
Oh, Jonah.
That couldn't be further from the truth. You're Dad, and I love you more than anything in this world. "I know that now," Jonah said, his voice stronger. "Being here, with you and Dad, it's like I'm remembering who I really am. Does that make sense?" I hugged him tightly, blinking back tears. "It makes perfect sense, sweetheart." As the days passed, Jonah continued to open up, revealing more about the extent of Lila's manipulation. It was like watching a weight being lifted from his shoulders with each confession. Eli noticed the change too. One afternoon, as we watched Jonah laughing with a neighbor's kid, something he wouldn't have done weeks ago, Eli turned to me, his eyes shining. "Mom, I can't believe the difference," he said. "It's like I'm seeing the real Jonah for the first time in years." I squeezed his hand. "He's healing, Eli. You both are." Eli nodded, a mix of emotions playing across his face. "I've been thinking about the future, about what's best for Jonah. And," I prompted gently, "I want to fight for full custody," Eli said, his jaw set with determination. "Seeing him here, with you, I realize now how toxic our home environment was. Jonah needs stability, love, support. He needs us." Pride swelled in my chest. "I'm with you every step of the way, Eli. We'll do whatever it takes to keep Jonah safe and happy. That evening, as we sat around the dinner table, a scene that was becoming beautifully routine, Jonah suddenly put down his fork. "Dad?" "Grandma," he said, his voice small but steady.
I
"I don't want to go back. To live with Mom, I mean,
Can I stay here?
with both of you." The vulnerability in his eyes nearly broke me. Eli reached out, clasping Jonah's hand. "That's exactly what we want to, buddy," he said. "We're going to make sure you're safe and happy no matter what." Jonah's face lit up with a smile that reached his eyes, a rare sight in recent years. "Really? You promise?" "We promise," I said firmly, including myself in this pact. As I looked at Eli and Jonah, united and healing, I felt a surge of determination. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Lila wouldn't give up without a fight, but we'd face it together. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to truly believe that everything would be okay. Jonah's words from earlier echoed in my mind. "Grandma, I feel like I can finally breathe here." It was more than just a house. It was a sanctuary where love and healing could flourish. And I was determined to protect it at all costs. The courthouse loomed before us, an imposing structure that seemed to embody the weight of the moment. Eli stood beside me, his jaw set with determination. Jonah, sandwiched between us, gripped our hands tightly. "Ready?" I asked softly. Jonah nodded, his eyes reflecting a mix of fear and resolve. "As long as you're both with me." We entered the building, the click of our shoes echoing in the marble hallway. Our lawyer met us at the courtroom door, her face serious but confident. "Remember," she said, "stick to the facts. The evidence is on our side." As we took our seats, I caught sight of Lila across the room. Her once immaculate appearance was disheveled, her eyes darting around wildly. For a moment, our gazes locked, and I saw a flicker of something, desperation, perhaps, or regret, before her mask of anger slammed back into place. The proceedings began, a blur of legal jargon and testimonies. Eli spoke eloquently about his awakening to Lila's abuse, his voice breaking as he recounted the changes he'd seen in Jonah. When it was Jonah's turn to speak, my heart swelled with pride at his courage. "Living with my mom was like drowning," Jonah said, his voice small but steady. "But now, with Dad and Grandma, I can breathe again. I feel safe. I feel loved." Lila's outburst came suddenly, her shrill voice cutting through the courtroom. "This is all lies. They've turned my son against me. Marlo has poisoned our family." As the judge called for order, I saw the last of Lila's support crumble. Her own sister, seated in the gallery, shook her head in dismay, finally seeing Lila for who she truly was. The judge's ruling came swiftly: full custody to Eli, with supervised visitation for Lila pending completion of therapy and parenting classes. As the gavel fell, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was over. We had won. Outside the courthouse, Jonah threw his arms around Eli and me, tears streaming down his face. "We did it," he whispered. "We're really a family now." Eli knelt down, looking Jonah in the eye. "We've always been a family, buddy. Now we just get to be the best version of ourselves." As we walked to the car, I spotted Iris waiting for us, a broad smile on her face. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'm so proud of you, Marlo. You fought for what matters most." That evening, as we sat around my dining room table, now our dining room table, I looked at the faces of my son and grandson. There were still shadows in their eyes, scars that would take time to heal. But there was also hope and love and the promise of a brighter future. Eli raised his glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," he said. "And to the strongest woman I know, my mom, who taught me what it really means to fight for family." I felt tears prick my eyes as Jonah added, "And to never giving up, even when things seem impossible." As we clinked our glasses together, I was struck by the truth of Jonah's words. We had faced seemingly insurmountable odds, but our love and determination had seen us through. Later, as I tucked Jonah into bed, a nightly ritual I now treasured, he looked up at me with eyes full of trust. "Grandma," he said softly, Do you think Mom will ever change? I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. I don't know, sweetheart. But what I do know is that you are safe and loved and surrounded by people who will always protect you. Jonah nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. I know. Sometimes the hardest truths lead to the strongest bonds, right? I blinked back tears, recognizing my own words reflected back at me. That's right, my brave boy.
And our bond?
It's unbreakable. As I closed Jonah's door, I found Eli waiting in the hallway. Without a word, he pulled me into a tight embrace. We stood there, holding each other, two generations united by love and the shared experience of overcoming adversity. Our family had been tested, broken, and reforged. We emerged stronger, our bonds deeper than ever before. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we would face them together, a family bound not just by blood, but by choice, resilience, and unwavering love. My father and stepmother destroyed my life. After my mother's funeral, my greedy father kicked me out of our home and married her ex, my stepmother, who was nothing but a schemer. With a cold smile, she reminded me that I had forgotten about my $2 million inheritance. That's when I made a choice. I would seek revenge with the help of my grandfather. Little did I know, in the coming weeks, unexpected events would unfold, leading me down a path I never imagined. My name is Emily, and I'm 16 years old. I live in San Antonio, Texas, but my life hasn't been easy. It all started when I was just 11, the day my world shattered forever. I lost my mother in a car accident, an event that haunts me every single day. What I didn't know then was that the accident wasn't an accident at all. I remember that day vividly. The sun was shining bright, and I was playing outside, laughing with my friends. I had no idea that my mother was on her way home from work, never to return. When the news came, everything changed. I was devastated, and the grief consumed me. Emily, sweetie, come here. My grandfather, James, called from the kitchen. He was a retired professor in his 70s, and after my mother's death, he took me in. He was all I had left, and I could see the pain in his eyes as he tried to comfort me. Yeah, Grandpa, I replied, wiping my tears away. Dinner is ready. I made your favorite macaroni and cheese. He smiled, trying to lighten the mood. As I sat at the table, I glanced at the empty chair where my mother used to sit. The silence felt heavy, filled with unspoken words. I miss her, I finally admitted. I know, Emily. I miss her too, James said softly. He looked down, unable to hide his sorrow. But we have each other. We can get through this. Just when I thought life couldn't get any worse, Robert, my father, entered the picture again. After my mother's death, I had hoped he would step up and be the father I needed. Instead, he started dating Samantha, an old flame of his. I didn't understand how he could move on so quickly. Samantha was in her late 40s, and it didn't take long for her to push her way into our lives. At first, I tried to be welcoming, thinking maybe she could help fill the void my mother left behind. But I quickly realized that she had other plans. Emily, it's time you moved in with me and Samantha, Robert announced one evening. I was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. You'll be living with us now. We're getting married. Married? You can't be serious. I shot back, my heart racing.
What about me?
I need you. Mom just died.
He didn't look at me.
Samantha, and I want to be a family. You're old enough to take care of yourself. Heartbroken and betrayed, I was forced to leave my home. You can't do this. I cried as he packed my things. This is my home too. Not anymore, Emily. Samantha wants nothing to do with you. You'll live with your grandfather. His voice was cold, and I felt tears streaming down my face as I was taken to my grandfather's house. James welcomed me with open arms, but I felt hollow. You'll be safe here, he assured me, sensing my despair. We'll figure this out together. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Samantha had always been overly friendly, but her smile felt more like a mask. She wanted to erase me, to take my place in Robert's life. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Samantha became more controlling, often criticizing me. "You're just a burden," she would say, her voice dripping with disdain. "If your mother hadn't been so reckless, she'd still be alive." I was shocked and hurt by her words.
How could she say such things?
I wished I could escape the reality of my life, but there was nowhere to go. One evening, I overheard Robert and Samantha arguing in their bedroom. "I can't stand her," Samantha yelled. "She's a constant reminder of what we've lost." Robert's voice was low and tense. "We have to get rid of her. The money will be ours. She doesn't deserve it." I felt my heart drop. What money? My mother had left me an inheritance worth $2 million, and now I realized they wanted it all for themselves. I needed to find a way to protect myself, to expose their deceit. James noticed my distress. "Emily, you need to talk to me if something's wrong," he said one night as we sat on the porch, the night air heavy with unspoken fears. "It's Samantha. She's always saying mean things to me, and I think she wants to hurt me," I confessed, my voice trembling. James's expression turned serious. "I've sensed something isn't right. Let's keep an eye on them. We'll find out the truth." In my gut, I knew that I couldn't trust them. They were plotting something, and I needed to be ready. Little did I know how deeply their betrayal would cut, and how it would set off a chain of events that would change our lives forever. As days passed, I felt more isolated and scared. I often sat in my room, imagining how I could escape the darkness surrounding me. But with James by my side, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps together, we could uncover the truth behind my mother's death and stop Samantha and Robert from taking everything from me. The storm was brewing, and I could sense it. But I had no idea how fierce the tempest would be or what it would reveal. The stage was set for betrayal, and I was determined to find the strength to fight back. The days turned into weeks, and the unease in my home grew thicker. Robert and Samantha wore their fake smiles like masks, but I could see the cracks beneath them. My nights were filled with restless dreams, visions of my mother and echoes of Samantha's cruel words. I felt lost in a web of deceit, but deep down, I knew I had to stay strong for my mother's memory. One evening, as I sat in my room studying, James knocked softly on my door. "Can we talk, Emily?" he asked, his voice gentle yet firm. "Of course, Grandpa." I put my books down, my heart racing with anticipation. I wanted to share my fears and worries, hoping he would help me make sense of everything. We settled in the living room, the warm glow of the lamp casting soft shadows. "I've been doing some thinking," James began, his expression serious. "I think we should hire a private investigator." My eyes widened. "A private investigator? Do you really think things are that bad?" "I believe Samantha and Robert are hiding something," he replied, leaning forward. "If we can gather evidence, we might expose their true intentions." I felt a surge of relief, mixed with anxiety. What if they find out? What if they try to hurt us? James placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "We'll be careful. The truth has a way of coming out, and I want to protect you." The next day, James contacted a private detective named Mr. Lawson. He was in his late 40s, with a stern but kind demeanor. When he arrived at our home, I felt a mix of hope and fear. Would he be able to help us uncover the truth? "Tell me everything," Mr. Lawson said as he settled into a chair, his notepad ready. James and I exchanged glances, and I took a deep breath. "I think my father and stepmother want to hurt me," I started, my voice trembling. "They're not who they seem. I overheard them talking about money and how they want to get rid of me." Mr. Lawson nodded, taking notes. "I'll look into their backgrounds and see what I can find. Sometimes people's pasts hold the key to their intentions." As he worked, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe we could uncover the truth and put a stop to Samantha and Robert's plans. Days turned into a week, and every day felt like an eternity. Finally, Mr. Lawson called us in for a meeting. "I have some information that you need to hear," he said, his expression grave. "It's about Samantha." My heart raced as I sat down. "What did you find out?" "Before she married Robert, she was involved in a car accident that resulted in the death of her first husband," he began. "The details surrounding it are suspicious. Witnesses say that she had been arguing with him just before the accident. I gasped, my mind racing. So, she might have had something to do with that, too? Possibly, Mr. Lawson replied. There's also evidence that links her to your mother's accident. I found tampered records indicating that the brakes on your mother's car were disabled before the crash. No, I exclaimed, feeling sick to my stomach. This can't be happening. They did it on purpose. James's face turned pale. Emily, this is serious. We need to take this evidence to the police. But what if they find out we're investigating them? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. We have to take that risk, James insisted. Your safety comes first. After hours of debate, I finally agreed. It was time to confront the truth, no matter how painful. I felt a mix of dread and determination as we prepared to meet the police. That evening, James and I made our way to the local police station. The building loomed in front of us, a symbol of hope and fear. As we stepped inside, I felt my heart racing. Would they believe us? Would they take our claims seriously? We met Officer Ramirez, a kind woman in her 30s who listened intently as we shared our story. You're saying that your father and stepmother are involved in your mother's death? She asked, her brow furrowing. Yes, I replied, my voice shaking. We have evidence that they tampered with her car. Officer Ramirez took a deep breath. This is serious, Emily. I'll need to review your evidence and speak with Mr. Lawson as well. As she gathered her notes, I glanced at James, who looked both proud and anxious. We had taken a step toward justice, but I knew the road ahead would be difficult. As we left the police station, I felt a mixture of hope and fear. The truth was finally coming to light, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Robert and Samantha would retaliate. They were cunning, and I had to be ready for anything. That night, I lay awake in bed, thoughts racing through my mind. I couldn't stop picturing my mother's face, the way she smiled, the warmth of her hugs. I had to do this for her, to ensure that those who had wronged us faced justice. I felt a fire ignite within me, a determination to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The storm was approaching, and I could feel the winds of change swirling around us. I had to be brave. I had to be strong. And most importantly, I had to be ready for what was coming next. The days dragged on after our meeting with Officer Ramirez. I felt a sense of dread hanging over me as we waited for news about the investigation. James was doing his best to keep my spirits up, but the looming threat of Robert and Samantha made it difficult to find peace. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table working on homework, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mr. Lawson. We need to talk. Urgent. My heart raced. I immediately looked up at James, who was reading a newspaper in the living room. Grandpa, Mr. Lawson wants to meet us. He said it's urgent, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. James folded the newspaper, concern written all over his face. Let's go meet him. We need to know what's happening. We drove to the detective's office, the silence in the car heavy with unspoken worries. As we entered the office, Mr. Lawson greeted us with a grim expression. Thank you for coming. We need to discuss some very serious findings. Is it about Samantha? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. Yes, and it's not good, he replied. He gestured for us to sit down. I've uncovered some information that changes everything. Samantha was not only involved in your mother's accident, but was also linked to other suspicious activities. What do you mean? I pressed, a knot forming in my stomach. Mr. Lawson leaned forward, his voice low. I found records showing that Samantha was financially struggling before your mother's accident. She was in serious debt. After your mother died, she inherited a significant sum of money, which she used to pay off her debts. It looks like she planned this all along. My mind reeled as the pieces started to fall into place. You mean she killed my mother for money? It appears so. And there's more, he continued. I discovered that Robert was aware of her plans. He may have even assisted her in tampering with your mother's brakes. James clenched his fists, his face filled with anger. How could he betray his own family like that? This is going to require solid evidence, Mr. Lawson said, looking at both of us. I need you two to help me gather more information. We need proof of their conspiracy if we're going to bring them down. What can we do? I asked, my heart racing with fear and determination. Start by keeping an eye on them. Document everything you see. If they say anything incriminating, we need to know. And don't let them know we're watching, Mr. Lawson instructed. As we left the office, I felt a mix of dread and resolve. I couldn't believe the extent of the betrayal. I was terrified of what Samantha and Robert might do if they found out we were onto them. The following week, James and I kept a close watch on Robert and Samantha. It felt like a scene from a movie, hiding in shadows and listening for anything suspicious. I often felt like I was walking on a tightrope, balancing my safety with the desire for justice. One afternoon, as I was sitting in my room, I heard voices coming from the living room. I crept down the hallway and peeked around the corner. James was on the phone, looking worried. "Are you sure?" "I can't let her be in danger," he said, his voice tense. I felt a chill run down my spine. What was he talking about? I knew I had to confront him. I walked into the room. "Grandpa, who are you talking to?" James quickly hung up the phone, his face a mixture of concern and anger. "Emily, you shouldn't be eavesdropping. It's not safe." "What's going on?" I pressed, feeling a surge of frustration. "Is it about Robert and Samantha?" He took a deep breath. "Yes, but it's more complicated than that. They know we're investigating, and I'm worried about your safety." "What do you mean?" I felt my heart race. "They wouldn't hurt me, would they?" "I don't know, but we need to be careful." "I think they're planning something," he replied, worry etched across his face. That night, I lay in bed, my mind racing with possibilities. What could they possibly do? I felt vulnerable and scared, but I knew I couldn't back down now. I had to protect myself and my mother's legacy. The next morning, I awoke to a text from Mr. Lawson. "Meet me at the usual spot. I have important news." I glanced at James, who was busy making breakfast. "I have to go out for a bit," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Be careful, Emily," he warned, his eyes filled with concern. As I made my way to the meeting spot, my heart raced. I had no idea what Mr. Lawson would tell me, but I hoped it would bring us closer to justice. When I arrived, Mr. Lawson was waiting for me, looking even more serious than before. "I have something you need to see," he said, handing me a file. "This is evidence that will help us take them down." As I flipped through the documents, my heart sank. The truth was darker than I had imagined. This was more than just a betrayal. It was a chilling conspiracy that threatened to destroy everything I loved. I could feel the storm closing in, and I knew we were on the brink of something significant. "Are you ready for this?" Mr. Lawson asked, his eyes locked onto mine. I took a deep breath, my resolve hardening.
"Yes."
"I want justice for my mother, whatever it takes." The battle was about to begin, and I was determined to fight. The tension in the air felt thick as I clutched the evidence Mr. Lawson had given me. Each piece of paper seemed to carry the weight of my mother's memory, the betrayal I had endured, and the fight for justice that lay ahead. I knew that now was the time to confront Robert and Samantha. They had taken too much from me, and it was time to reclaim what was rightfully mine. After our meeting, I rushed home, my heart pounding with anticipation. James was in the living room, pacing nervously. "What did Mr. Lawson say?" he asked, his eyes filled with concern. "I have evidence. We can take them down," I replied, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. James nodded, determination in his eyes. "Let's confront them together. We can't let them get away with this." We devised a plan. The next day, we invited Robert and Samantha over for dinner under the guise of wanting to mend our broken family ties. I felt a knot in my stomach as I prepared the table, but I had to stay focused. This was for my mother. When they arrived, Samantha greeted me with a bright smile that felt like a dagger to my heart. "Emily, it's so good to see you," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Yeah, great to see you too," I replied, forcing a smile as I ushered them to the dining table. As we ate, the atmosphere was tense. I could feel James's eyes on me, silently urging me to take the plunge. Finally, I gathered my courage. "Robert, Samantha, there's something we need to discuss," I said, my voice steady. What is it, Emily? Robert asked, feigning ignorance. I know about the accident, I said, looking directly at Samantha. I know you tampered with my mother's car brakes. Samantha's smile faded, replaced by a cold glare. What are you talking about? I have evidence, I declared, pulling out the documents Mr. Lawson had given me. You planned this, didn't you? You wanted her out of the way to get to the money. Robert's face went pale. Emily, you don't know what you're talking about. This is ridiculous. But I pressed on, my voice rising. You wanted to inherit my mother's estate. You wanted me out of the picture so you could live your life without any consequences. James stood beside me, his presence a fortress of support. You too are sick. We have proof of your conspiracy, and you will be held accountable for your actions. Samantha laughed, a harsh, chilling sound. You think anyone will believe you? You're just a child with wild fantasies. Watch me, I said, my voice unwavering. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I prepared to make the call. As I dialed Officer Ramirez's number, Robert lunged forward, panic in his eyes. You don't have to do this, Emily. We can talk about this. But it was too late. Officer Ramirez, I need you to come to my house right away. We have evidence of a crime, I said, my voice steady. Within minutes, the police arrived, and I felt a rush of relief wash over me. They took Robert and Samantha into custody, their faces twisted in disbelief. I could hardly breathe as I watched them being handcuffed, the weight of the moment crashing down on me. You're making a big mistake, Emily, Robert shouted as they led him out the door. No, you're the one who made a mistake by betraying your own family, I shouted back, feeling a surge of empowerment. With Robert and Samantha arrested, I finally felt the chains of my past beginning to break. I could breathe a little easier, knowing justice would prevail. In the days that followed, the trial unfolded, revealing the shocking details of their conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming, and I felt a sense of closure as I watched them being held accountable for their actions. With their imprisonment, I could finally begin to heal. My grandfather James and I moved forward, honoring my mother's memory and rebuilding our lives. I learned that while betrayal can devastate, resilience and truth can shine through the darkness. With the support of my grandfather, I was no longer just a victim. I was a survivor, ready to embrace my future and reclaim the life that was taken from me. The storm had passed, and as I stood on the porch, I looked out at the horizon with hope. I knew my mother would be proud.
The text glowed mockingly in the darkness of our bedroom. 3 little dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared again, a digital heartbeat of betrayal. I hadn't meant to look at Mark's phone. It had buzzed twice while he was in the shower, and I'd reached for it automatically, thinking it might be the fertility clinic with our latest results. Instead, I found myself staring at Lauren's name. Lauren, my best friend since college. Lauren, who'd held my hand through 3 failed IVF treatments. Lauren, who was now sending my husband messages at 11:43 p.m. I miss you already. Today was perfect. My fingers hovered over the screen. The bathroom door creaked open, steam billowing out. I kept my eyes fixed on the phone, my voice steady. How long? Sarah? Mark's footsteps halted. What are you? How long? The silence stretched between us like a rubber band about to snap. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. Mark's breathing grew heavier. 6 months, he finally said. I laughed. The sound was foreign, almost hysterical. 6 months. While I'd been injecting hormones and crying over negative pregnancy tests, you've been fucking my best friend. It's not like that. His voice cracked. You've been so focused on having a baby, you barely see me anymore. Everything is about schedules and temperatures and... Don't you dare. I stood up, his phone still clutched in my hand. Don't you dare make this my fault. Mom's right, you know. A woman your age should have had children by now. Lauren. She understands what I need. The phone hit the wall with a satisfying crack. Mark flinched, but I felt nothing. No tears, no rage, just a cold, crystalline clarity. Your mother. Another laugh bubbled up. Of course. Helen must be thrilled. Her barren daughter-in-law finally getting what she deserves. Sarah, please. Does Evan know? The question surprised even me. Mark's brother had always been kind, always defended me against Helen's subtle jabs. Mark's silence was answer enough. Get out. My voice was steel. Pack a bag and get out. This is my house too. You can't just. Actually, I can. The house is in my name. Remember? You insisted on it because of the tax benefits from my old executive position. The position I gave up because you wanted me to focus on starting a family. He stood there, water still dripping from his hair, looking lost and pathetic in his towel. For a moment, I saw him as Lauren must have, weak, easily manipulated, desperate for validation. Fine. He grabbed some clothes, stuffing them haphazardly into a gym bag. But this isn't over. We need to talk about this properly. Oh, we will. I watched him dress quickly, fumbling with his buttons. Send Lauren my love. Tell her I'll be seeing her very soon. He paused at the doorway, one hand on the frame. I never meant to hurt you. Funny thing about intentions, Mark. They don't mean shit when you're sleeping with your wife's best friend. The front door slammed. I stood in the darkness, listening to his car start up and pull away. My phone lit up, Nina calling. She always had a sixth sense about these things. I let it ring. There would be time for comfort later. Right now, I needed to think. To plan. Lauren had always been so proud of her perfectly curated life, her carefully maintained image. It would be a shame if something happened to destroy all that. I picked up Mark's shattered phone from the floor. The screen was cracked, but I could still make out Lauren's last message, "Sweet dreams, baby. Tomorrow's going to be amazing." No, Lauren. Tomorrow was going to be something else entirely. Helen Mitchell's perfectly manicured nails drummed against my kitchen counter. 3 sharp taps, a pause, then 3 more. Like Chinese water torture in designer jewelry. Mark tells me you're being unreasonable about all this, she said, examining a spot on her blazer. Really, Sarah, at your age, you can't afford to throw away a marriage over one indiscretion. I continued chopping vegetables for a salad I had no intention of eating. The knife made a satisfying thunk against the cutting board. Did he tell you who he was sleeping with? Well, no, but... Lauren. The tomato split perfectly in half under my blade. Your tennis partner. The one you've been pushing him toward since our second failed IVF. The drumming stopped. In the silence, I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, recalculating her approach. Lauren is a lovely girl, she finally said. From a good family. And she's still young enough to. The knife clattered onto the counter. Get out. I beg your pardon? Get out of my house before I do something we'll both regret. She stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced precision. You know, when Mark first brought you home, I told him you weren't suited for our family. Too ambitious. Too focused on your career. A proper wife understands her priorities. Like Lauren does? Exactly like Lauren does. She reached for her purse, then paused. The fertility treatments clearly aren't working, dear. Perhaps it's time to accept that some women aren't meant to be mothers. The doorbell rang before I could respond. Helen's lips curved into a smug smile, probably expecting Mark. Instead, Evan's voice called out from the entryway. Sarah? You home? Helen's smile vanished. Evan doesn't need to be involved in this. Too late. I moved past her to open the kitchen door. We're in here. Evan filled the doorframe, his usual easy smile replaced with concern. His eyes darted between Helen and me, taking in the tension. Mother, he said coolly. I didn't expect to find you here. I was just leaving. Helen clutched her purse like a shield. Sarah and I were having a civilized discussion about her marriage. Really? Evan's eyebrow rose. Because I just ran into Mark at Lauren's place. Seemed pretty uncivilized to me. The color drained from Helen's face. You went to Lauren's? Someone had to tell her husband. My head snapped up. Lauren's married? 3 years now. Poor guy works overseas most of the year. Engineering contracts or something. Evan's voice was casual, but his eyes were hard. Funny how that never came up in all those tennis matches, right, Mom? Helen's composure cracked. She hurried past Evan without another word, her heels clicking rapidly across the floor. The front door slammed behind her. You knew, I said when we were alone. About Mark and Lauren. Evan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Found out last week. Been trying to figure out how to tell you. Why didn't you tell Mark's precious mother instead? Because she already knew. Has known for months. He pulled out his phone, showing me a series of texts. She's been covering for them. Arranging their meetings under the guise of charity events, tennis lessons. The pieces clicked into place. All those times Helen had insisted I was too tired, too stressed to attend her social functions. The knowing looks between her and Lauren at family dinners. She wanted me gone, I whispered. All this time, she was orchestrating my replacement. Sarah. No, this is perfect. I felt that cold clarity returning, sharper now. Helen's always been so concerned about the family's reputation. I wonder how the country club would react to a scandal involving their beloved social chair. What are you planning? I smiled, thinking of Helen's carefully cultivated image, of Lauren's secret marriage, of Mark's desperate need for approval. Nothing they haven't earned. Evan studied me for a long moment. Just be careful. Revenge has a way of burning everyone involved. Don't worry. I picked up the knife again, resuming my methodical chopping. I'm very good at controlling the temperature of things. You should know that by now. The tomato juice spread across the cutting board like blood, and I felt something dark and satisfying unfurl in my chest. Helen wanted a proper wife? I'd show her exactly what a career woman could do when properly motivated. The country club's annual charity gala buzzed with artificial warmth and whispered judgments. I watched Lauren work the room, her red dress catching every eye, her laugh carrying across the space like wind chimes. Mark trailed behind her like a lost puppy, nodding at whatever Helen was saying to their little group. You sure you want to do this? Nina asked, adjusting her camera. As the event's official photographer, she had the perfect cover for capturing everything that was about to unfold. Just be ready. I smoothed my black dress, funeral appropriate, I'd thought when buying it. Lauren's husband should be arriving any minute. Right on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from Evan, James Adams just cleared security. 5 minutes. I'd found Lauren's husband easily enough. A few calls to old contacts from my executive days, some carefully worded emails about urgent business matters. James Adams had been more than happy to fly back early from his contract in Dubai when I mentioned concerns about his wife's handling of their joint accounts. Sarah. Lauren's voice cut through my thoughts. She stood before me, champagne in hand, wearing the same fake smile she'd used when consoling me after my miscarriage. I didn't expect to see you here. Wouldn't miss it. I sipped my water. Helen was very insistent about maintaining appearances. Yes, well. Her eyes darted to where Mark stood. Sometimes appearances are all we have. How's the marriage, Lauren? Yours, I mean. Not mine. The champagne glass trembled slightly. I don't know what you're. Sarah Mitchell? A deep voice interrupted. James Adams stood behind Lauren, his face tight with confusion. I got your messages about the accounts. What's going on? Lauren went rigid. James? You're supposed to be in Dubai until. Until what, Lauren? I asked sweetly. Until the divorce papers were filed? Or until you'd finished transferring his family's inheritance into your private account? The color drained from Lauren's face. Across the room, I saw Helen grab Mark's arm, both of them frozen in horror. What is she talking about? James demanded. Nothing. She's just bitter because. Because you're sleeping with my husband? I raised my voice just enough to draw attention. Or because you and Helen orchestrated this whole thing while stealing from your own husband? The surrounding conversations died. Nina's camera clicked softly, capturing every moment. That's enough. Mark stepped forward, Helen clutching his sleeve. Sarah, you're making a scene. Oh, I haven't even started. I pulled out my phone, showing James the banking records I'd obtained. Your wife has been very busy while you've been away. Setting up offshore accounts, making large transfers. Helen helped her find quite a creative accountant. James grabbed the phone, his face darkening as he scrolled. Lauren's perfect mask cracked. It's not what you think, she pleaded. I can explain everything. Explain what? I pressed. How you and Helen planned this for months. How you used my infertility treatments as cover for your meetings. Or should we discuss the property you bought in your maiden name? The room had gone completely silent. Helen's social circle watched with barely concealed glee as their queen bee's carefully constructed world began to crumble. You vindictive bitch, Lauren hissed. You have no idea what you're doing. Actually, I do. See, while you were playing happy families with my husband, I was calling in favors from my old corporate days. Did you know tax fraud investigations can freeze all your assets? Even the hidden ones? James's phone started ringing. Lauren lunged for it, but he stepped back, his face cold. That'll be my lawyer. Excuse me. As he walked away, Lauren's composure shattered. You've ruined everything. No, Lauren. You did that yourself. I moved closer, keeping my voice low. You took everything from me, my marriage, my best friend, my dignity. Did you really think I wouldn't return the favor? Sarah, please. Mark stepped forward. This isn't you. You're right. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. The old Sarah would have suffered in silence, tried to fix things, blamed herself. But you all taught me something valuable about family and loyalty. Nina's camera captured the moment perfectly, Lauren's mascara-streaked face, Helen's horrified expression. Mark's dawning realization that he'd created this version of me. Sometimes, I said, raising my water glass in a mock toast. The only way to deal with toxic family is to burn it all down and walk away from the ashes. The fire alarm chose that moment to shriek to life, sprinklers raining down on designer dresses and perfectly coiffed hair. Right on schedule, thanks to Evan's timing. I walked out dry, protected by the awning, leaving chaos in my wake. Behind me, I heard Helen's outraged scream as her charity gala dissolved into expensive puddles. Sometimes revenge is best served wet. The manila envelope sat unopened on my kitchen counter for 3 days. Nina's photos from the gala were already making waves, Lauren's tearful confrontation with James splashed across social media. Helen's reputation in tatters. But this envelope promised something darker. My phone buzzed. Evan, have you looked at them yet? I texted back, not ready. The doorbell rang. I knew who it was before opening the door. Mark stood there, looking haunted, his wedding ring conspicuously absent. You shouldn't be here, I said. Lauren's pregnant. The words hit like a physical blow. I gripped the doorframe, steadying myself. Congratulations. I'm sure Helen's thrilled. It's not mine. His voice cracked. She's 3 months along. James's baby. She knew before. Before us. I laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. So she trapped you for nothing. Sarah, please. I need. What you need doesn't matter anymore. I grabbed the envelope from the counter. But since you're here, you might as well see what your mother's been hiding. The photos spilled across the kitchen table, surveillance shots from a private investigator. Helen meeting with Lauren months before the affair began. Bank statements. Property deeds. A systematic dismantling of James Adams's fortune, with Helen taking her cut as the facilitator. Mom wouldn't. Mark's face went ashen. She couldn't. She did. Lauren wasn't the mastermind, she was the weapon. Helen used her to get rid of me, probably planned to discard her too once she served her purpose. I spread out more photos. Your mother's done this before. 3 times. Different women, same scheme. How did you? I had resources from my executive days. People who owed me favors. The kind of connections Helen never thought I'd use. I tapped one particular photo. Remember Caroline? Your college girlfriend? The one who suddenly disappeared after Helen caught her looking at the family financial records? Mark sank into a chair, his world visibly crumbling. Why are you showing me this? Because you need to choose. Right now. Lauren's facing fraud charges. James's lawyers are very motivated, and they've got evidence linking Helen to everything. I leaned forward. You can keep protecting your mother, or you can do the right thing for once in your life. By helping you destroy my family? Your family destroyed itself. I'm just exposing the rot. His phone buzzed, Helen's face lighting up the screen. Mark stared at it, then at the photos, his hands shaking. What do you want me to do? Testify. Tell James's lawyers everything you know about Helen's involvement. Help them trace the money. And if I don't? I pulled out one final photo, Helen with Lauren's predecessor, dated 5 years ago. The woman's face was familiar. Too familiar. Then I send this to Evan. Let him know why his first wife really left him. Mark's breath caught. You wouldn't. The old Sarah wouldn't. But you all helped create this version of me. Remember? The phone kept buzzing. Helen's calls growing more urgent. Mark looked trapped, cornered by his own family's lies. I'll do it, he whispered. But not for you. For Evan. He deserves to know the truth. Smart choice. I gathered the photos, leaving him the ones he'd need for the lawyers. You should go. Lauren will be looking for you once the pregnancy news breaks publicly. He stood, aged years in minutes. At the door, he paused. I did love you, Sarah. In my way. Your way wasn't enough. I closed the door on his response. My phone lit up with a text from Nina. Lauren just posted about the baby. Social media's exploding. You okay? I looked at the remaining photos, evidence of Helen's past schemes. Of lives she'd ruined for her family's reputation. The familiar cold clarity settled over me again. I'm fine, I typed back. Just figuring out my next move. Because this wasn't about Mark anymore, or even Lauren. This was about Helen Mitchell, and the legacy of destruction she'd left in her wake. She thought she was protecting her family's reputation. I was going to make sure that reputation was the first thing to burn. The fertility clinic's waiting room felt different now. Sterile. Empty. Like visiting a house you once lived in, only to find strangers had painted over your memories. Mrs. Mitchell? The nurse's voice carried old sympathy. Dr. Williams will see you now. It's Miss Carter again, I corrected, following her down the familiar hallway. My maiden name felt like armor. Dr. Williams hadn't changed, same kind eyes, same gentle manner. But her expression held something new. Concern, maybe. Or pity. Sarah, she said, gesturing to the chair. I was surprised to see your name on my schedule. I need my records. All of them. She folded her hands on the desk. This is about the investigation, isn't it? The fraud allegations against Helen Mitchell? My head snapped up. She smiled sadly. Small community. Word travels. She pulled out a thick file. Helen called yesterday. Tried to access your records herself. Something about proving medical negligence on our part. The room tilted slightly. She what? She claimed you'd authorized it. When we refused, she became insistent. Dr. Williams opened the file. Sarah, there's something you should see. She slid across a lab report dated 6 months ago. My last failed IVF attempt. Look at the hormone levels. I scanned the numbers, then froze. This can't be right. Your body was responding perfectly to the treatment. The embryo was viable. Strong. She paused. Someone tampered with your medication during the critical window. The words hit like shards of glass. How? The prescription was altered. Dosage changed. Another document appeared. This is the original prescription. And this, she placed another beside it, is what was actually filled. Notice the signature? Helen's handwriting. Subtle changes to the numbers. Just enough to ensure failure. My phone buzzed. Evan, Helen's telling everyone you falsified medical records to frame her. Lauren's backing her up. They're going to the board tonight. The room spun. Dr. Williams's voice seemed to come from far away. Sarah? Do you need a moment? No. My voice sounded strange, distant. I need copies. Of everything. Already done. She handed me a sealed envelope. Sarah. Whatever you're planning, be careful. Helen Mitchell has a lot of influence in this community. I stood, envelope clutched to my chest. Not for long. Outside, Nina waited in her car. One look at my face and she knew. What happened? She killed my baby. The words tasted like acid. She made sure I'd never. My hands were shaking. Nina grabbed them. Sarah, breathe. Tell me what you need. My phone buzzed again. Lauren, this time, we should talk. About the baby. About everything. I need you to drive me to Lauren's. Are you sure? After everything. She's pregnant with James's baby. A baby Helen can't control. The pieces clicked into place. And she just gave me exactly what I need to destroy them both. Nina studied me for a long moment. This isn't just revenge anymore, is it? No. I touched the envelope containing proof of Helen's ultimate betrayal. This is justice. The drive to Lauren's was silent. She opened the door looking nothing like the polished socialite from the gala. Her eyes were red, her designer clothes replaced by sweatpants. I was hoping you'd come, she said. Save it. I pushed past her into the house. You're going to tell me everything. Every scheme, every lie, every time Helen manipulated someone's life for her precious family legacy. And why would I do that? I placed the medical records on her coffee table. Because you're carrying the one thing Helen can't control. And trust me, what she did to me? She'll do worse to you. Lauren's hand drifted to her stomach. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. If I help you, she whispered. Then we take her down. Together. I leaned forward. Or you can trust the woman who just proved she's willing to kill an unborn child to maintain her control. Lauren picked up the medical records with trembling hands. As she read, her face went from pale to ashen. Oh God, she breathed. What have I helped her do? The question is, I said, watching her world crumble like mine had, what are you going to do about it? Outside, storm clouds gathered. Perfect weather for what was coming. The Mitchell family estate loomed against the twilight sky, its windows glowing like predatory eyes. The annual board meeting for their charitable foundation was in full swing, Helen's last bastion of power and respectability. "Everyone's inside," Evan whispered, meeting me at the side entrance. "Mom's about to announce the new funding allocations." "Is Mark here?" "Front row. Looking like he'd rather be anywhere else." He touched my arm. "Sarah, are you sure about this? Once you do this..." "Your mother killed my baby, Evan." The words still felt raw. "She doesn't get to play charitable savior anymore." Inside, Helen's voice carried through the oak-paneled halls, smooth as aged whiskey. "And with these new initiatives, we'll be expanding our support for family planning services." Lauren waited in the shadows, one hand protectively over her stomach. Her testimony would seal Helen's fate, if she followed through. I stepped into the boardroom. Heads turned. Helen's speech faltered. "Sarah." Her recovery was immediate, practiced. "This is a private meeting." "Perfect. Because I have some private matters to discuss." I moved to the center of the room. "Like how you tampered with medical prescriptions. How you deliberately sabotaged my fertility treatments." Murmurs rippled through the board members. Helen's smile tightened. "You're clearly disturbed," she said. "Mark, perhaps you should escort your wife." "Ex-wife," I corrected. "And I have proof." I pulled out the medical records. "Your signature. Your alterations. Your calculated destruction of a viable pregnancy. Those records are falsified," Helen snapped. "Lauren, tell them. You witnessed Sarah's instability firsthand." Lauren stepped forward, trembling. All eyes turned to her. But before she could speak, Mark stood up. "It's true. All of it. I found Mom's notes. The plans. Everything." Helen's mask cracked. "Mark, sit down." "She did it before," he continued. "To Evan's wife. To others. Anyone who threatened her control over the family." The room erupted in whispers. Helen's face contorted. "You ungrateful," she caught herself, smoothing her expression. "Ladies and gentlemen, my son is clearly under duress. These accusations are supported by police evidence." James Adams stepped in from the hallway, flanked by 2 detectives. "The investigation into the financial fraud led us to the medical records. Helen Mitchell, you're under arrest." Everything happened at once. Helen lunged for the medical records. Someone screamed. I felt hands grabbing me, pulling me back. Through the chaos, I saw Helen's face transform into something feral, desperate. "You think this changes anything?" she snarled at me. "You're still barren. Still worthless. I protected this family from women like you." "No, Mother." Evan's voice cut through the room. "You destroyed this family. And now everyone knows." As the detectives led Helen away, her composure finally shattered. "Mark. Tell them. Tell them why we had to stop her." But Mark wouldn't meet her eyes. Lauren stepped closer to me, her voice barely audible. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have told you sooner. About everything." I watched Helen disappear through the doors, her perfectly crafted world crumbling around her. Victory should have tasted sweeter. Instead, I felt hollow. Nina found me later, sitting alone in the empty boardroom. "You did it," she said softly. "It's over." "Is it?" I touched my stomach, remembering the child that never was. "The truth's out. Helen's going to prison. But I still can't." "Sarah." Nina knelt beside me. "What Helen did was monstrous. But letting it consume you? That's letting her win. Then what was the point of all this? Justice. Closure." She squeezed my hand. "But revenge doesn't heal wounds. It just proves you survived them." Outside, camera flashes lit up the darkness. Tomorrow, the Mitchell family scandal would be everywhere. Helen's carefully constructed dynasty would be ashes. But as I sat there, surrounded by the wreckage of so many lives, I wondered if winning felt this empty for Helen too. If her need for control had left her as hollow as my need for revenge. The night air carried the scent of rain. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, nature's applause for a tragedy well played. The prison visiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Helen sat across from me, orange jumpsuit stark against her pale skin. Looking somehow smaller without her designer clothes and carefully crafted persona. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said, hands folded precisely on the metal table. I needed to understand. I placed Lauren's latest ultrasound photo between us. "She's having a girl." Something flickered in Helen's eyes. "And you came to gloat? To show me the grandchild I'll never meet?" "I came to show you what you failed to destroy." I leaned forward. "Lauren's keeping the baby. James is standing by her. Everything you tried to prevent is happening anyway. You think you understand anything?" Her laugh was bitter. "You saw the medical records. The fraud. But did you ever ask why? Because you're a monster? Because I was protecting them." Her mask cracked slightly. "Mark. Evan. This family destroys the women who enter it. Has for generations." I felt the floor shift beneath me. "What are you talking about?" "My mother-in-law did to me what I did to you. 3 times. Her words came faster now. "I lost 3 babies before I learned to play by her rules. To become what she wanted. The perfect wife. The perfect mother. So you became her?" Continued the cycle. "I became stronger than her." Helen's eyes burned. "I controlled it. Managed it. Protected my boys from women who would weaken them. Like Evan's first wife? She would have ruined him with her independence. Her career ambitions." Helen's fingers twitched. "Like you would have ruined Mark. By wanting a baby? By loving him? By making him depend on you." The words exploded from her. "Strong women destroy weak men. I made my sons strong by keeping them dependent on me." The truth hit like a physical blow. "You're not protecting them. You're caging them." "I'm surviving." Her composure cracked completely. "And now Lauren's baby will continue it. Another generation of Mitchell women, destroying themselves to please the family name." I stood up, my chair scraping against concrete. "No. You're wrong." "Am I?" "Look at yourself, Sarah. Look what revenge has made you." "Revenge didn't make me." I placed another photo on the table. Helen's arrest splashed across the morning papers. "You did. Every scheme, every manipulation, every baby you killed made me stronger. Made Lauren stronger. Lauren is weak. She'll fail, just like. She's already succeeded. She's breaking the cycle." I gathered the photos. "And so am I. By walking away? Proving me right? By choosing to heal instead of hate." I met her eyes one last time. "Your granddaughter will never know you. But she'll know your story. As a warning, not a legacy." Helen's facade shattered completely. "Sarah, wait." "Goodbye, Helen." I turned toward the door. "The Mitchell family line of destruction ends with you. You can't just leave me here." Her voice cracked with desperation. "I'm all they have." "No. You're all you have." I nodded to the guard. "And that's your real punishment." Outside, Lauren waited in Nina's car, her hand resting on her growing belly. "Did you get what you needed?" she asked. I watched Helen being led back to her cell through the prison window. "I got something better. Understanding. And I'm done." The words felt like releasing a breath I'd been holding for years. With all of it. The revenge, the anger, the Mitchell family legacy. Lauren's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. For everything. I know. I touched her stomach gently. But she's a new beginning. For both of us. Nina started the car, and as we pulled away from the prison, I caught one last glimpse of Helen through the barred windows. A small figure in orange, trapped in the cage she'd spent a lifetime building. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors of healing and hope. Tomorrow, I would call the fertility clinic again. Start fresh. But this time, I'd be carrying something stronger than revenge. I'd be carrying freedom. The nursery walls were a soft green, not pink, not blue, but the color of new leaves in spring. I watched Lauren arrange stuffed animals in the crib while her daughter kicked against my palm. She's strong, I said. Like her aunts. Lauren's smile was tentative, still testing the boundaries of our fragile new friendship. Both of them. The invitation to help decorate the nursery had surprised me. More surprising was how right it felt, this quiet act of healing. My phone buzzed, a text from Dr. Williams. Test results are in. Come see me? Go, Lauren said, reading my expression. I'll finish up here. The fertility clinic's familiar corridors no longer felt like a battlefield. Dr. Williams waited with a different kind of smile than before. The new treatment protocol is working, she said, sliding the results across her desk. Your body's responding perfectly. I stared at the numbers, remembering Helen's tampering. And there's no chance. I'm personally overseeing everything. She leaned forward. Sarah, you're ready. Whenever you decide to try again. The weight of possibility settled in my chest. Not hope, not yet, but its quiet predecessor. Outside, Evan waited on the clinic steps. We'd been meeting for coffee regularly, a simple routine that had evolved into something neither of us had expected. Good news? He asked. I showed him the results. His hand found mine, warm and steady. I saw Mark yesterday, he said carefully. He's starting therapy. Finally dealing with everything. Good for him. The words held no bitterness, only a distant acknowledgement. He asked about you. And what did you tell him? That you're healing. That we all are. A text from Nina lit up my phone. Lauren's water broke. The hospital waiting room filled quickly. James pacing nervously, Nina documenting everything, Evan's solid presence beside me. Mark arrived last, hovering uncertainly at the edges until James surprisingly waved him over. Hours passed. When the nurse finally appeared, her smile told us everything. Healthy baby girl, she announced. Mother's doing fine. We filed in to meet the newest Mitchell, though she'd carry the Adams name, breaking one more link in Helen's chain. Lauren looked exhausted but peaceful, her daughter tiny and perfect in her arms. Sarah, she said softly. Would you like to hold her? The baby settled into my arms, her weight both foreign and familiar. She opened her eyes, dark and clear, untouched by legacy or pain. What's her name? Mark asked from the doorway. Lauren met my eyes. Hope. Later, in the hospital garden, Evan found me staring at the stars. You okay? I thought revenge would feel like winning, I said. But this feels like freedom. From Helen? From everything. The anger. The need to prove something. I touched my stomach, thinking of Dr. Williams's results. I'm ready to try again. For me this time, not for anyone else's expectations. You won't be doing it alone, he said quietly. A nurse called us back inside. Through the nursery window, I watched Hope sleeping peacefully, unaware of the generations of pain that had led to her existence. My phone buzzed one last time, a collect call from the prison. Helen. I declined it, then deleted her number. Some legacies deserve to end. Some chains need breaking. And sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living well, free from the shadows of those who tried to define us. Hope stirred in her sleep, one tiny fist raised like a victory sign. Behind me, Evan waited patiently. Ahead, the future stretched out like an unwritten page. I was done with revenge. Done with the Mitchell family saga. But my own story? That was just beginning. Nina's camera flashed, capturing the moment, not for evidence this time, but for memory. For hope. For proof that even the darkest paths can lead to light, if you're brave enough to keep walking. And I was ready to walk forward, leaving the ashes of revenge behind, carrying only the lessons it had taught me about strength, survival, and the power of choosing your own legacy.